Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
We've talked before about how police officers who get in trouble at a specific police department can often quit before the investigation is done and just go start working someplace else. And we've heard stories before about bad cops that were at one department, then another department, and then it's like a game of whack-a-mole. So interestingly, Nathan sent me a note and said, Steve, check out the story from WXYZ TV in Detroit, which is the ABC affiliate there. A huge breach of trust. Michigan lawmakers aim to stop problem cops from finding work. It's a package of bills up in Lansing could plug the holes that troubled officers slip through. So state lawmakers are taking up a package of bills that they hope will put an end to troubled officers circulating throughout departments across Michigan. The bills were introduced following more than a year of reports from Channel 7 News Detroit showing how problem officers have been allowed to jump from department to department, but they leave behind things like scandals, lawsuits, and criminal charges. So a state senator from Detroit said, it's a huge breach of trust. We shouldn't be cycling through bad cops when someone clearly knew that this was someone who should not be in law enforcement. In Michigan, the agency that helps the police is the Michigan Commission on Law Enforcement Standards, or MCOLS. And of course, that answers the question of who indeed should guard the guards. And we've always pointed out that, when the police investigate themselves and found that they did nothing wrong, how good was that investigation? It's small investigation. Staff has an enormous responsibility, and that is to ensure that every officer who leaves a department to join another meets the standards to be an officer. Now, the MCOLS executive director says the vast majority of people who leave agencies do so in good standing. He goes, but there are 18,500 officers in Michigan, 18,500. Even if 1% of them don't, that's a significant number. But as 7 News Detroit has shown, officers with troubling histories have been hired by new departments without state watchdogs seeming to notice. Examples include officers deemed to be untruthful, a Detroit officer seen punching a citizen in the face, a Highland Park officer found to have improperly tased a homeless man, an Oakland County Sheriff's deputy caught buying narcotics on duty, officers accused of harassment by multiple women, or engaging in inappropriate acts or sexting with women they'd pulled over. And imagine that. You get pulled over by a police officer for a traffic infraction. Next thing you know, your texts are being blown up by that cop. So a state senator from Lansing said some of the instances are appalling. What you just named are some egregious examples of individuals who violated the public trust in one department. And because of the lack of bills like what we have before you now, they've continued to be able to violate our citizens. So TV station says it wasn't supposed to work this way. When an officer leaves a police department, their department is supposed to report to MCOLS exactly why they left. Any department looking to hire them needs to conduct a thorough background check of the officer on their own. But too often it doesn't happen. Usually it's just, we're short of people. And some guy applied or some gal applied and they're qualified, right? 7 News Detroit found that police chiefs hired officers without even knowing why they left their last police department. Can you imagine going to a job interview and they don't even ask you, oh, by the way, why'd you leave your last place? No. In other cases, departments claim that an officer left in good standing when they were actually under investigation or facing internal charges. Sometimes it was state investigators who dropped the ball, failing to flag problem cops before another agency could hire them. And that is, of course, part of the game playing that's going on here. So a cop gets in trouble. They start an investigation. Remember, you're innocent until proven guilty. So if the cop quits and goes and applies and gets hired at another place, they can say, well, I had no convictions or anything or no disciplinary actions back there because they may have started an investigation, but they hadn't reached any conclusions yet. And of course, that's the misleading part. The fact that you're being investigated at all is something that should be disclosed to the new department. So the senator said this is where this bill is important to finally put an end to this practice and give MCOLS, finally giving them additional tools to rein this stuff in. In November, several senators also introduced a package of bills designed to help plug some of the other holes that allowed officers to slip through. If signed by the governor, they would allow MCOLS to set standards for departments doing background checks. The bills would also require departments to fully disclose why an officer left and whether they were ever under investigation during their final year of employment. The bills would also give the state greater authority to revoke a law enforcement license and would provide MCOLs a 90-day window to revoke an officer's license if it was activated in error. And what the bills don't address, at least as of right now, is any discipline for departments that give false information about why an officer left or don't perform a complete background check at all. And that's a pretty big hole there. When you have police chiefs who say that an officer left in good standing who did not leave in good standing, or a police chief who said they did a background check and they did not do a background check, how do you guard against that? Asked the Channel 7 reporter. The executive director of MCOL says, well, I'm aware of other states where if an agency head does not follow their versions of the MCOLs Act, that action is taken against their law enforcement license. In certain cases, they could be criminal offenses, but that's in other states. Senator says she's open to adding more teeth to the law down the road, but first she wants to get these fixes on the books. The senator's legislation already has endorsement of major law enforcement groups, including the Michigan Association of Chiefs of Police, whose executive director says that the Channel 7 reporting provided a public service and a warning to police chiefs. So this is interesting because if the chief of police and their association like this law, then who would be opposed to it? I can't imagine anybody going, well, no, I think we should not have such strict standards when it comes to police officers. I can't imagine that being the case. But this is a serious problem. But I also am a little disturbed that the senator says we've got a package of bills, we're considering them right now. Yeah, there's a gigantic hole in one of them, but we'll fix that later. And I understand where she's coming from on one level, but I think that it's something she should look at now. And here's the reason why, is that packages of bills get passed, they get put into law, and it takes a little while to figure out what works, what doesn't work. If there's problems, it might get challenged in court. Courts might look at it and say, hey, it's been written incorrectly or something. But the problem is that when it comes to bringing a package of bills back, in essence, to clean them up, polish them, fix some of the issues, it can get very, very difficult. And as you can imagine, all this stuff takes time. It takes a ridiculous amount of time to get stuff like this to happen. And so let's suppose these bills get passed, everything's happening, and we discover that because there's no teeth in that one enforcement section, the law is getting violated, but there's no teeth to it. Okay, let's go back and put some teeth into it, which means that you've got to get all this momentum that you lost back again. Things in Lansing and Washington, D.C. move at what we call a glacial pace. They move about as fast as glaciers move. I'm not talking about glaciers melting. I'm talking about them moving, like actually moving, okay? You'll hear a story. They go, yeah, this glacier moves so many millimeters per decade. I'm just kidding. They move faster than that. But the point is, if you're standing there watching, you don't see anything happening. And that's kind of like what happens in Lansing and Washington. So this is a great step in the right direction. There'll be a lot of fanfare of people saying, look, we finally passed something to reform this. And others are going to say yes, but they left out that bit about the enforcement. What happens to, the entities that violate this law? But it's a step in the right direction. So I'm one of these people. I'm cautiously optimistic. When somebody tries to do the right thing and they're headed in the right direction, I'll say, okay, that's great. But can't you fix that thing before it goes into effect? No? Couldn't you? Couldn't you try? So Nathan, thanks for sending that. It's a very, very interesting story. I hope this law gets passed, of these bills, and I hope that it does something because this is a problem. So WXYZ Television in Detroit, the ABC affiliate, a huge breach of trust. Michigan lawmakers aim to stop problem cops from finding work, at least not without disclosing. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. What we see mainly depends on what we look for.